Hey folks, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, I know I've said this before, but it's worth repeating. One of my favorite things about doing the Dungeon Dive is stumbling upon a game that is not on a lot of people's radar, a game that is kind of off the beaten path. And that's especially true when the game is as good as Gathering Gloom. So Gathering Gloom is a game made by Harvey and Carly Cornell. They are a husband and wife duo. This is self-published. They have a small little company called Dragon Phoenix Games. And I actually discovered Dragon Phoenix Games and Gathering Gloom when I was doing some research for some house rules for a game that we're going to cover in the next episode of the Dungeon Dive. But Gathering Gloom, I would put this game in kind of the same bucket as something like A Touch of Evil or Arcadia Tenebra. And those are two kind of horror-themed games that I love a lot. And while I consider these games in kind of like a trilogy, I think you could play these games all on the same weekend for a kind of ultimate horror game marathon. Gathering Gloom is not necessarily an adventure game. At its core, it is a worker placement game. It is a deck building game. It is a threat management game. However, beyond its mechanisms, beyond the things that you are doing, what Gathering Gloom does so well is create lasting memories and stories. And the way that all of the different pieces of this game work together in interesting ways. This is a fantastic game. This is one of the best games I've played this year. I don't think it's new. I don't know exactly when it came out. It's not a brand new game, but this is one of the best gaming experiences I've had in 2025. So this says that as a member of the charming family, you want to live peacefully in Bainbridge Village and keep your home and family businesses running. But the villagers think you may be monsters, and they mean to prove it. And they're right. You are monsters, and you're kind of evil monsters. This isn't a situation like the Addams Family or the Munsters, where they are just kind of misunderstood eccentrics or freaks or weirdos. No, the charming family, they're up to no good. Gathering Gloom is a worker placement, deck building, comic gothic horror game in which you play as the monsters. So you are playing as a member of the charming family, and the members of the charming family include Jackson Chernoff, the werewolf, Hannah Detweiler, the zombie, Samantha Charming, the witch, Barnaby Collier, the vampire, Elmore Krankenstein, the mad scientist, Mr. E-Man, the phantom. We have Annis May Lunares, she's a moon hag. We have Alfred Byron Normal, he is Krankenstein's monster. Ezra Clay, the golem. Josanne Duloc, the ghost. Erica Peabody, the doppelganger. And Maggie O'Harley, the banshee. And so the game that I just finished playing a couple days ago was with Jackson Chernoff, the werewolf. So each of the characters will have a certain number of traits that they can spin to match symbols. This also has set collection. And you're trying to match symbols to take certain actions and to solve a certain number of crises to win the game before your member of the charming family causes too much fear in the village, in which case the villagers will band together with their torches and their pitchforks and they will come after you. That's one way to lose the game. Another is to run out of time. The doom track, if it ticks up to 50 and you have not solved all of your crises, you've not resolved all of those crises, then you also lose the game. And so there are 4 different traits. We have acumen, charm, horror, strength, and then a wild trait. And so you need to collect those symbols in order to spin them to accomplish different things throughout the game. One of the ways you will collect symbols is through these deed cards, and this is where the deck building mechanism comes in. There is a huge stack of deed cards, and each of the characters will have their starting hand or their starting deck. And so the werewolf starts with 6 cards, such as Strain, Dash, Murder, Terrified, Deceive, and Snatch. Now these deed cards, they can be used for multiple things. You can spin them in order to match those trait symbols that you might need to accomplish things. And each of these deed cards also has a special action that you can take when it is your turn, such as murder. You can kill one of the villagers, or if the villagers become a stalker and they suspect you of being up to no good, then you can kill your stalker. And so during a game, there is no limit to the number of cards you can have in your deck or in your hand. You are trying to gather these as you play so you can spend them. And like I said, there is a very, very large number of deed cards throughout the game. Each of the characters has their own starter deck. And then throughout the game, there will be many opportunities to draw these cards and add them to your deck. So in order to win the game, you have to resolve a certain number of crises depending on the difficulty that you are playing at. I've played with 14 crises. So as a member of the Charming family up here in this village here, we have the Charming family spaces. We have the Bainbridge Universal Mining and Processing Plant, or BUMP as it's known. We have Darkmoor Manor, the Charming family home, and we have their other business here, the Elm Shadows Mortuary. Throughout the game, various crises are going to be happening at these three locations. There is a main enemy group working against the Charming family, and they are called the Brotherhood of Light. They are a group of literal angels and do-gooders and reporters who are out to expose the Charming family for their wickedness and take them down. And it's up to us to stop them. Each of the crises will have a certain number of traits that we have to match, whether by spending the traits on our character, by spending the traits from our deed cards, or by enthralling villagers and making them be our minions, and then we can use their traits in order to overcome these crises. So for instance, this one here needs 1 acumen, 3 charm, and 2 horror in order to resolve. So we'll take our little stack here. I've already selected out 14. And we draw 3 at the beginning of the game and we put them in their locations. So the first one here goes to Bump, and that says that Brotherhood causes Quarry to lose orders. Oh man, they're trying to sabotage our business. We have the Elm Shadows Mortuary. A priest inquires into mortuary practices. Oh, we can't have some meddling priests stalking around our mortuary. And we also have Darkmoor Manor. Unicorn's headmaid tries to save the family. So another priest out there wanting to save us from our wicked ways. We also have 3 different spaces that when we go to those spaces, we can trigger their powers. And those are usually ways to draw more cards or to interact with the board in various ways. Now, as we move down the board south from the Charming family territories, we move into the village. But first we pass through the Mockingbird Hill Cemetery. Now, this cemetery is super spooky. At the beginning of the game, there will be 1 dead body in the cemetery. And so right now, Mildred Luking has been killed. She was a reporter. Maybe she was snooping around, and so we took her out. The various villagers might have a special power. They will have a trait that you can use when you enthrall them, so they're one of your minions. They have a strength that you have to overcome. They have a fear that they have to overcome, courage that you have to overcome their courage in order to scare them. And they also have some wariness. We'll talk a little bit about wariness later, but one of the interesting things about this game is the various spaces and the villagers are all suspicious of you. They have a certain level of wariness. And if you ever match or have a certain number of the wariness symbols, then the villagers will become stalkers. And if they are a stalker, you will put them on your character card here, and they are constantly hounding you. They are following you around, trying to catch you up to no good. And as your fear level that you are causing in the village, as it ticks up, then that will trigger your stalkers. If your fear level ever gets up to 12, or you are just causing a ton of terror, a ton of fear in the village, then that is one of the ways that the game ends. Now, what's really interesting is these bodies in the cemetery, they can actually be harvested for their soul. And when they are ravaged. So we have ravaged their body, and we have harvested one of these soul tokens from the body. And then this becomes a trait that we can spend in order to overcome a challenge later on in the game. However, at certain opportunities throughout the game, these bodies in the cemetery, they might be exhumed, they might be dug up and used as evidence against you. If the body is unravaged, that's not so bad, but it still might cause some suspicion. But if the body is ravaged, that is really bad, and you will have to deal with some peril if that comes out as evidence against the nasty things that you have been doing. Next to the cemetery, we have the Charming family staff members. And each of the various locations, the 3 locations, has 3 staff members. So we have Bump, the Manor, and the Mortuary. So at Bump, we have Betty Kearns, Matthew Bream, and Henry Wilcox. At the Manor, our staff includes Silas Lurch, Penelope Adams, and Sandy Brown. And at the Mortuary, we are assisted by Janice Karloff, Sammy Green, and Buddy Smith. Now, staff members, they are villagers, so they can come out on the village track. You can enthrall them to become your minions. They can become stalkers. But what's interesting about the staff members is they can be used for their trait anywhere that they are out on the board. So think of the staff members, they are working for the Charming family. They may be clueless about their wrongdoings. They may be willfully ignorant about their wrongdoings, but they want to help the Charming family until the evidence is just overwhelming and they can no longer look the other way. Next to our staff here, we have these cards that represent a town council and mob justice. And at certain points when the timer ticks up, you might have to draw one of these cards, and this will be an additional thing that you have to deal with on that turn. Okay, let's move down a little bit more, and we're moving into Main Street here. And Main Street, this is where the various villagers will come out. And the villagers, we have a stack of villagers here. So we have people like Beatrice Farley, Brian Rosenberg, Katrina Danforth. I love the art on these villager cards. I think it is so cool. Martha Merkel, and so on. Some of the villagers will have these additional special abilities that will trigger at certain points in the game. When you're just learning the game or you're playing the non-advanced mode, you want to remove the villagers that have special traits. And so at the beginning of the game, you will shuffle these up and you will draw out 4 different villagers. And so these are the villagers that we can enthrall by certain ways, overcoming their toughness or scaring them, turning them into minions. However, these villagers can also gather up evidence, and they can gather up items that can help them overcome the Charming family, help them expose the Charming family. So right now we have Ian Spencer, Rosie Parka, Martha Merkel, and Helen Waite. And speaking of evidence and items, over here we have the evidence track. And at certain times, depending on the roll of the die, at the beginning of each turn, you roll, I think this is the Doom die, this is the Gloom die. Evidence might come out. And as evidence moves up this track, if it ever leaves the track, then there is an opportunity where that piece of evidence can be slotted on your character card, thus adding some of those trait symbols, some of those wariness symbols. And if those symbols ever match up in certain combinations, then the villagers have gathered enough evidence to come after you, and they might become one of your stalkers. And if you already have a stalker, that stalker might force you to take some peril. And so we have all kinds of different evidence. A hearse is seen. Something in an old yearbook that somebody found, maybe giving them a clue. Maybe they found the Necronomicon in an old library and it has a Charming family's name written in it. Or various cemetery visits have unearthed bodies and found clues. The villagers have started looking through old newspapers. So there's all kinds of different evidence. And you have to deal with the evidence. You can bury the evidence. You can get rid of the evidence. If a body ends up as evidence, you can sneak over to the evidence locker and move it to the mortuary, or take it and bury it in the cemetery. But these evidence cards are also used for items. And when they're used for items, you turn them over the other way. And so the villagers might be armed with a press pass or an MBA degree, a shotgun, a police source, a journal, handcuffs, a camera. And so as the villagers gain their items, you will slot them underneath. That'll add a wariness to them. That might add a different profession, or it might add a way that they can overcome, or it'll add strength. It'll add like silver or holy or herbal strength to the character, to the villager, because some of the characters, such as the werewolf here, they are vulnerable to herbal remedies and silver. And so if a villager is armed with something that allows them to have one of these traits, then it is harder for the werewolf to enthrall that villager, or maybe the werewolf will be more susceptible to that villager's power. That is super, super cool. I absolutely love that. In my last game, I was playing as the werewolf, and I had 2 villagers out, and they were both lawmen, and the lawmen are pretty powerful. However, the lawmen were both armed with holy weapons. And so in my game, in my story, I was saying that either the lawmen, maybe they weren't the brightest, and so they had their mythologies wrong. And so they thought holy items could take out a werewolf, or maybe they had the wrong clues. And so they were arming themselves with the wrong instruments of destruction. That is so cool. I love it. I love when the villagers get items, because it just adds this little bit of narrative and some mechanism in order to make the game more interesting. Now, if a villager is armed with an item and you happen to enthrall them, and one of the ways that the werewolf can enthrall villagers is they can use their strain D cards in order to enthrall them. And then that character moves to your character sheet along with their items. And so sometimes you want to enthrall villagers that have items, because those items might be able to help you. So as those villagers, as they gather clues, as they gather those symbols, at the end of each turn, you are going to do a little check using this little kind of matrix here, but it sounds more confusing than it is. You are looking for either 4 different symbols. So if all of the symbols total up on the villagers, or on your the spaces where you are, or on the evidence, if you have visual, deductive, oral, and intuitive, then you gain a stalker, and one of the villagers has gathered enough evidence and they become your stalker, and then you have to deal with them. If they have 4 of the same wariness, then the same thing happens. Now, what's interesting is if they have 3 different ones, so they need a possible 4th one, or they have 3 of the same, thus they need a possible 4th similar icon, then you turn to the deeds deck, and this is a little randomizer, so there are 3 different uses for this deeds deck. If you have 3 matching or 3 different with a possibility of getting a 4th, you turn over the deed deck and you look at the icon on the top. If that triggers a 4 of a kind, or 4 different symbols, then that also triggers your stalker, and they will start stalking you. Again, super, super cool. As you start dealing with stalkers, and as things start getting really bad, as the threats start snowballing, then you have to deal with this peril deck. This peril deck, whoops, that was actually a villager. He should have been in the village deck. But this peril deck is a whole bunch of really bad stuff that you have to deal with. So as the game progresses, the threats start snowballing and things become more and more dangerous. Discard the first villager on Main Street. Add fear equal to the number of wariness symbols. So you've done something that has caused fear. And so that villager has maybe moved out of town, but everybody else is like, why did Ann Spencer move out of town? She left without any of her possessions. Where did she go? And they're already suspecting the charming family of being up to no good. And so your fear level will move up. Move 2 deed cards from your hand to the common discard pile. Okay, that sucks. You would lose 2 of your deed cards. So if you were doing some careful deck building, you might get stymied there, and then you'd have to kind of start over and building your deed engine. The first 2 villagers on Main Street are killed and end up in the morgue, unless players in village location takes them as stalkers. Interesting. So these peril cards are super cool. They add a lot of story. They add a lot of little random events and elements that can really make your game much more difficult, but also just more fun, because it's fun to think of being a member of this monster family out there terrorizing this village and trying to keep their misdeeds secret. Okay, and then finally we move down to the very, very bottom of the board, and these are the various spaces in the village that the monsters can move to, that you can move to while you are playing. And when you are playing, you are going to use one of these absolutely lovely little painted standees. I love the art. There are two main artists in the game. One of them is the designer. What's her name? I forgot her name. One of them is Carly Cornell, the wife of the duo, and she does some of the art, and then somebody else does the art for the various villager cards. But I love the way this game looks. I think it looks fantastic. But when you move into a location, you will be able to take that location's action. And so printed on the board, we have Acme Engineering, we have Dacia's Diner, we have Madame Zelda's Psychic Readings, we have the Thayer Undead, we have the Bainbridge Town Square. This is where you want to go to lower your fear, and I love this because, you know, you're just kind of mingling with the crowd. You know, hey, look, we're not up to no good. I'm not really a werewolf. I'm not really a ghost. I'm not really a mad scientist, and you can use your charm trait in order to lower your fear. I love that idea. And then here we have the Constabulary and the Morgue, and so this is where you want to go to like remove that evidence or to remove those bodies that might come back to haunt you. But what's really cool is even though each one of these has a single power, such as for a worker placement, when you place your character there, you do its power. Each one of these also has a token that you can use that adds a double-sided different ability for each of the spaces. And so you might want to not use Acme Engineering for one game. You might want to use Hook and Crook Accounting. Or maybe instead of Madame Zelda's Psychic Readings, you want to use the Mystical Bazaar. And so there's all kinds of variety there and how you want to set up your spaces. I think that is super, super cool. There is a little cheat sheet here that gives you an overview of all of the various spaces, including those random spaces. And we also have the spaces that are up there at the top of the board for the charming family spaces. And we also have an icon manifest because this game, it does have a lot of icons, and it can be a little confusing to learn because there is so much going on. So Gathering Gloom is not a simple game. I don't think it's overly complex, but there is a lot going on, and it can be a little fiddly. It can be a little difficult to learn, but once you start playing, you really get into the groove of everything, and I think it just works. The turns are rather simple. All of the spaces on the board are considered adjacent, so you don't need to count spaces. You can move from one space to the next. At the beginning of each turn, you will roll your Gloom die here, and this will tell you if a villager comes out or if the Gloom track ticks up. As the Gloom track ticks up, if it ever gets to 50, then you have lost. Maybe some evidence will come out, an item might come out. What else can happen here? The Gloom track might tick up twice and an item might come out. At certain points in the game, you will also roll the Doom die, and this might trigger a peril or maybe some damning evidence or cause you to take more fear. And then once the Doom counter gets up to spot 18, then you also have to start rolling the Dread die. And this will cause more of those crises to appear at the charming family locations. So that's how more crises come out for you to solve, for you to resolve. I think the rule book overall is pretty well written, but the game does a lot of things different, especially different than games that I am used to playing. And so it did take me a little while to learn, but after one full game, I kind of have the game kind of memorized now. I mean, it flows. There's a really, really good flow to the game. I think the most confusing part for people will be when it comes time to do your villager or your stalker check and counting up those symbols and just knowing what you're looking for. But once you learn that, it goes really, really quickly. You also get a handful of tokens here that you can use to keep track of things. So when you have a whole bunch of icons to match for those crises, or if you're trying to overcome some type of challenge, you can use these tokens here to keep track of those. As you use your character's abilities, as you use the abilities of your staff members, as you use the abilities of your enthralled minions, they will have to be exhausted, and so you will place these exhausted tokens on the cards to show that they can't be used again that turn. But yeah, overall, man, Gathering Gloom is just a fantastic game. This is exactly the kind of game that I love to discover and that I love to play. It plays well, it's unique, there's a lot going on, it's not overly complicated, but I would say it's kind of fiddly. You know, think of this as kind of, I don't know, it's almost a Euro-style Arkham Horror or something like that, or a Touch of Evil, you know. I could see this game really winning people over who don't typically like an Arkham Horror or a Touch of Evil adventure style game, but they want something really thematic. They especially like, you know, Hammer horror or old Gothic horror. I could see this game really winning over other types of game players. You know, there's kind of there's a cross section between games that we like on the Dungeon Dive and this game, and that cross section could be a really, you know, crucial part to bring into this hobby. And so, you know, if you have a friend who maybe doesn't really like adventure games and you really want to play something adventurous and they want something a little more tactical, not tactical, but just a little bit more going on mechanically, I think Gathering Gloom might be a perfect game to play with them, especially if they're into horror. Now, I wouldn't want to play this game with people who aren't going to get into the theme, because the theming is so important in this game, and that's why I think this is such a great solo game, because I'm able to get into the story. I'm able to connect all of these various dots, all of these interlinking mechanisms, and all of these various villagers and the dead bodies and people at the morgue and the evidence and the Brotherhood of Light attacking the Darkmoor Manor, and these priests and these reporters snooping around trying to unearth my dark secrets. You know, I'm really able to get into that theme and connect those narrative dots. The game isn't going to tell you a story. This isn't a game about telling a story. This is a game about creating stories and creating those kinds of memorable moments that only happen because of chance randomness, where all of these various disparate elements come together to make something really special. And I think Gathering Gloom is a very, very special game. I am so happy that I stumbled upon it, and I can highly, highly recommend it. I think it's about $50 or $60, and I think that price is great. I mean, you get so much stuff, hundreds of cards, great art. Everything is mostly high quality. You know, the player boards are a little flimsy. They're a little too big. They don't look great. Some of the iconography is definitely a little amateurish. You know, it doesn't scream high production values. You know, you wouldn't see like Fantasy Flight Games or CMON using icons like this. Some of these look like maybe stock icons or wingdings or something like that. But if you can get over some of the amateurness of this game, this is a hidden gem, well worth investing your time and money. So yeah, I hope you like this overview of Gathering Gloom. We will talk to you later. Bye-bye.